Hi, this is Adrenakrohm. Welcome back to the Filterverse modulation series. This time, we're looking at the random module. This one is incredibly flexible and will provide a huge amount of life to your patches. So let's get started. So first up, as always, an overview of the parameters. The first thing you'll notice, obviously, is the waveform display here in the center, or to the left, I should say. Then we have the rate to the right, all the way from 32 bars all the way up to 1/64th. Also includes dotted and triplet notes. Let's put it back on, let's say 1/8 for now, doesn't really matter, 1/4 will do. If we turn off the tempo, we have the rate in hertz, like so. To the right of that we have rhythm and subdivision. In the division options we have sub, tuplet, sub and tuplet, complex and prime. I think the best way to explain those is just to show you an extract from the manual, which is page 84, should you wish to search for it. And here we have them listed quite neatly. So sub is divisions of 2, which means you get these divisions, tuplet divisions of 3, and you get these, etc. Below that we have retrigger, and this determines whether the random sequence will start again each time a MIDI note is received, or whether it will just continue indefinitely. If you have retrigger on, just ensure that you are actually receiving MIDI into the plugin, and you'll notice that by this little keyboard icon over here to the left. I'll show an example of that later on. Unipolar we've covered in previous modules, but once again this just determines whether the modulation is one way or both ways. So unipolar, and you have it on cutoff, the modulation would go all the way from 0 all the way to 120 in this case, or if it was on bipolar and you have it at 0, then it would go -60 and +60. Glide we've covered in previous modules, but once again this just determines whether it jumps from one step to another or whether it's a smooth movement from one to the other. So if you look at these steps here, you can see these steps are very, very sudden, but if you turn glide on, it won't jump instantly to these steps, it will gradually ramp up or down. Range and quantize work together, and they're incredibly useful. Quantize you saw in the Metanob episode, and that features all the same scales and modes, like so. So once again, you can quantize the random to these scales. The range parameter, however, determines the depth of the modulation. So at the maximum, you have 10 octaves, or you can turn it down should you wish to only go 2 octaves, for example. Just ensure that if you're using this range parameter, ensure that the cutoff is all the way up. You want it at 100% modulation, and then you adjust the depth of the modulation via the range knob here. Right, so now let's look at some examples. So in this example, we have this drum loop going. So just a bit of a dubstep loop. So let's turn Filterverse on, and we're going to use that to quantize these drums to a certain scale. Let's just play it back without any modulation whatsoever, and we just hear the flange acting on those drums. Now let's turn random on. We currently have it set to 1/4, the rhythm set to 2.6, and the division sub and tuplets. A little bit of glide, and the range set to, let's go 2 octaves. With a mode of sustained 2. We can try that with different tunings as well. You can hear much of an impact the rhythm and the division make. Let's put this back on, let's go minor pentatonic, like so. Let's now copy random 1 to random 2. Let's hold Alt and drag it across. And now we have exactly the same parameters on random 2. Let's assign that to cutoff also, but we're going to do a uncoupled pan, like so. And then we'll modulate the left with random 1 and the right with random 2. Alright, let's go a bit crazy. Let's drag flange. So we have 3 flanges. Let's copy, 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 and copy. And you guessed it, Now let's play this back and see what we have. Maybe change this one to strings, perhaps. So you can go completely crazy with it should you wish. And just to remind ourselves what it sounded like, just this boring old drum loop. And now... pretty cool. Next up, just a basic example, we have this pad. We turn Filterverse on. Let's turn on the first random now. And we have that, which is obviously way too chaotic. Instead, we only want the random to happen sporadically throughout the bar. So let's turn on the sequencer, like so. We're going to assign that to the random. So now the random is active only when the sequencer tells it to be. So if we join a little pattern like so, you can see it go up. Join another one now, and there. Go a couple more. So now we have a bit of controlled random, adding a touch of glitchiness. Really nice. Next up we have the same pad, which sounds like so, exactly the same. Let's turn Filterverse on. Once again, just a low pass. Let's now turn the sequencer on. We have this pattern drawn in, and this pattern modulates the cutoff. So now we have a bit of rhythmic life to it, but I think that's a bit too static, it's a bit too boring. So let's add a random, and we also have that attached to cutoff, just a touch, and that's going to add a bit of movement to it also. And with random off, you hear it's very static. So much more life with a random element to it. Moving on to the next example now. On this one, we're going deep into the tundra. So I'll turn Filterverse off, and we just have this white noise. Obviously incredibly horrible. So here we just have a low pass with resonance up. Let's turn random on. Once again, it's assigned to cutoff, set at 1/4 triplet, with a bit of rhythm involved. And the key to this patch is the glide. So now it's currently very high, but if we turn this down, it sounds nothing like wind at all, it's just jumping from one step to another. But when we play with this, you get that sweeping effect. On the cutoff, let's maybe change that to stereo. And then while we're here, let's add a bit of space, a bit of reverb to it. Super cool. Moving on now, we have this bass line, or it's just a saw I should say at the moment. Let's turn Filterverse on, let's turn the random off, so we just have a low pass. So that's sounding good, but I want to add a bit of grit to that. So to do that, let's turn random on. Let's take off tempo, make sure it's quite a low speed. Obviously assign it to cutoff. Way too much, we just want just a touch, just a smidge. I just want it to sound like a wonky or a broken filter. And I think we've definitely got that now. Just a bit less. There we go. So for the final example, we're going to use the retrigger mode. The source sound is just the bass line that we had earlier, which sounds like that. A tiny bit of change to the MIDI. Let's turn the random on, turn tempo sync off, and turn the rate all the way down to 0, and then turn retrigger on. Now each time a new MIDI note is received, then that will trigger a different position in the cutoff. You can see it dancing around each time a new MIDI note is received. To do this, just make sure that you're receiving MIDI on Filterverse. So when I play this back, you'll see this little MIDI note or the keyboard light up each time a new MIDI note is received. And each time that note lights up, then that triggers a new position in the cutoff. So there we go, the random generator, one of my favorite modules. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll be back with the sequencer. See you then, bye bye.